Chivalry 2 is a medieval sword game with a heavy sense of realism, which is odd considering how camp this game is. These put together make Chivalry one of my favourite knight combat games. And I say that phrase a lot in this video, so to be clear, when I say knight combat, I mean games where you play with a sword in a medieval setting. When planning this video, the main question I wanted to focus on was, how does Chivalry 2 engage you with chaotic knight combat? I will explore this in two parts, how the gameplay is chaotic, and then how everything else is chaotic. You can pick between 4 different classes. Knights are slow with good offense and defense. They can hit hard and take the most hits. Archers are archers with the least choice of weapons in the game. Arrows have weight, so you'll have to account for distance. Thankfully, the arrow cam allows you to see where your arrows are landing, so you can readjust your aim accordingly. The footman class is more tactical, having weapons like spears and the spike tool to keep enemies at a distance. Vanguards are slightly less powerful knights, but in exchange they have higher stamina pools, allowing them to stay in skirmishes more often, able to block and do their attacking combos for longer. Each subclass has some depth to it, with different weapons, sidearms, abilities, health, stamina, run speed, passive buffs and debuffs. No single class seems to be more powerful than the other. Chivalry 2 does not appear to be a game where you must play a certain class or use a certain weapon to do well. When it comes to using the melee weapons, it gets both nuanced and chaotic. When you swing your sword, the hitbox is active from the moment your sword swings until the swing ends. Meaning, if you want to hit multiple enemies in front of you, it is not good enough to press a single button. You have to move your camera around so the sword goes that far. If you want to hit your opponent with the side of your sword, you have to drag your camera around so that it actually hits your opponent first, rather than depending on who attacked first and who has a faster animation speed. Having to drag your camera to move your sword is disorienting, but not in a negative way. It allows you to have much more control over your weapon, or feel like it at least. You have full control over practically all assets of the sword. Your camera is flying about so that everything feels more rapid. You don't get the chance to stop and focus. This is compounded by the directions. When performing a combo, you have to follow the direction your sword will swing, often right to left, left to right. You always have to drag as your sword swings, not giving you a chance to look at everything going on around you, which in my experience only ever heightened my stress as I had to recover quickly. It's like blinking my eyes each time I swing, which sounds bad, but it isn't with how easily you can defend yourself. If you hit your enemy first, it will interrupt their attack and give you the advantage on swing speed. So timing and feinting become a big part of combat, and trying to hit and build a combo becomes important, which is a weird thing to say when you can easily one-shot people sometimes. An optimal way to hit first is to feint, which delays your attack slightly, but allows you to change the type of swing. And if done right, you could hit the enemy from an unexpected angle, which adds tension for the person attacking as you are not sure if you're going to get punished for this, but then it also gives tension for the defender as you are deciding between swinging back and then risking getting hit, or whether to defend and take the stamina hit instead. It just makes combat unpredictable. Not impossible to infer in the moment, but definitely not easy, making it feel like it is hard to read others. It can feel like a first-person fighting game. If someone is just holding their shield, you can try to deplete their stamina, which will break their shield. You can also kick down their defense, or pivot and swing around them. If you kick their shield down, you can usually get a free hit in, which de-incentivizes turtling. Holding block at all drains stamina, so it needs to be timed instead of something you can just sit on. If someone is holding their shield at you, you can engage in a combo until one of you makes a new play. You can kick down their shield, which creates this moment of tension as you wind up the kick and then go into hit, as the kick can be dodged. When you block, you have to meet the weapon where it's at. If someone is attacking you from your right side, you have to block with your sword on the right side. This camera sword play just creates hectic responses. There are 3 types of attacks: stab, overhead, and swing. You can do a feint attack and switch up between overhead, stab, and swing. Since you have to block the weapon's blade, it becomes a game of matching your sword to theirs by using your camera. Thankfully, these attack types mean you're either having to block vertically, horizontally, or directly, which is keeping you on your toes. You can mindlessly attack, and you can play smart. You're incentivized to do both. You can also dodge, which encourages movement, so fights can move around. Despite this, I find myself, as well as others, rarely dodge, which I put down to how awkward it feels to do, similar to the guard breaking. Although I see kicking happen more often, maybe because it's a more important part of the fighting than dodging is. Ripostes happen when you attack immediately after blocking an attack. They are faster and put you in a block state. You can also perfect parry, which is done by attacking after blocking in a hit and matching the attack type of the enemy. This then mitigates the stamina loss and knockback of normal blocks and gives you the swing advantage, which encourages trying to predict your enemy or punishing players who spam. The window for this is small, as you have to have the blades physically connected. Riposting encourages you to swing back, so the fights don't turn into a waiting game. Chivalry is pushing you to fight as much as possible, which is added on with the combo system, being able to spam swing every time you hit, as you have a slightly faster window than your defender. This incentivizes attacking, encouraging just going in and doing something. As opposed to slow, patient combat, we get fast, aggressive combat. When your opponent lands a hit, they have a speed advantage if they decide to combo. You can interrupt the combo with a quick jab if need be, and thanks to the swinging mechanic, it makes it easier than most games to engage in 2v1 scenarios. You're able to block one attack using the active riposte block, so you don't have to defend individually from each person. This encourages this chaotic combat. If in these 32 versus 32 game modes you could only feasibly 1v1, the game mode would die. It isn't rare to see people win 2v1s or even 3v1s. You're able to riposte one attack, then use the automatic block riposte to attack back, so you aren't forced to defend against 3 swords. So in 32 versus 32, you can charge at a group of enemies confidently, which is needed for the game mode, as it is pretty rare to be in 1v1 scenarios. Adding on to this crazy combat, you can also just throw your weapon if you feel like it. You're able to throw most things you hold. Throwing away any of your weapons adds to this not serious tone the game is going for, which is further added by the fact you can pick up objects in the world, boxes, chairs, or even just bread, to throw at whim. This lack of hard attachment to your weapons creates a whimsical atmosphere. In the 32 versus 32 game mode, you'll either be defending or attacking. Defending is what it sounds like. You have to stop attackers from reaching their objective. The objectives can range from burning objects, destroy an object, area capture, destroy gates to a castle, escorting a VIP, ignite explosives, which basically works as control, but a couple of your teammates have to hold X first, kill a VIP, get to the switch that opens a gate, push an object to a location, and steal a certain object. The objectives where you have to destroy a bunch of objects are really fun. It feels like pure carnage and destruction. You have to actually hit the things as opposed to just interacting with them, which brings this connection between the destruction and the game world. Thankfully, Chivalry does not have a long respawn timer. This is why I think this game's customization is for the most part pointless. The game doesn't make you feel like a heroic standalone knight, and more like cannon fodder smashing into a brick wall. This is backed up by the fact that you respawn in groups and not individually. This helps keep the combat chaotic, as you have groups of enemies smashing into each other over and over again, as opposed to having people move one at a time or needing to wait around to form a group, so it just keeps that game going. Every time you respawn, you're pushed to run back into that chaotic combat. The game starts you off as sprinting towards the objective, not just standing way far out back. During combat, the knights will often cry and complain, and it's so easy to battle cry as you spawn that everyone seems to do it naturally. It It creates this really fun and camp atmosphere. For a game that has pretty realistic combat, the game feels unserious and loose. It doesn't take its notes seriously, and it has a real loudness to its sound design in general. Not obnoxiously loud, but loud. And all this helps with this feeling that you're the next wave crashing into the enemy. These massive wave clashes are oddly made fun by being able to hit your teammates. Not because you want to hit them intentionally, they are just damaged by your swing. Albeit, thankfully seems to be less damage, which is good, otherwise these massive clashes would be terrible. Despite this, too many times I've had myself or others attack each other because the clothing of the enemies and allies are just so similar. It isn't helped by the fact that there is no indicator as to who is on your team. This can feel like an intentional decision because it is chaotic, but you can decide on whether that's bad because I honestly can't. The fact that you can hit everyone really makes it feel like every swing matters. Sometimes you can swing, get a headshot and decapitate an enemy, even in the middle of a hectic clash. That feeling is superb. Or you'll be swinging and hitting your teammates, but with how much you need to hit the enemy, you can't stop. Everyone's hit and swing matters. It's like accidentally tripping over someone whilst playing a sport. You feel bad, but you gotta keep going. The bigger game modes have a similar level of chaos to Battlefield games, although the action is more tight, so you're not spending as much time running into an action point. But the maps are also not so small that everyone has to do the same thing. If you want to play back with a bow, or charge as a knight, you can. If you want to isolate opponents and hold secret paths, or just run for the objective, you can, and the game allows that. On some maps there are siege weapons. The main weapons are ballistas, trebuchets, and catapults. Each takes precise aiming and has a long reload time, although firing them and making these massive explosions in the environment is insanely fun. Even having them explode around you is fun. It creates this chaotic atmosphere of so many things happening all at once. It also lends itself to this idea that nothing needs to be focused on by everyone. People can contribute to different strategies. These large maps give so many options with different routes, angles, and positions to attack or defend from. This allows this freedom and variety that keeps it more fresh than other games. You aren't just relying on the quality of the enemies. There are also 40-player game modes. I'm not going to talk about them, they're just a less intense version of the main mode. I guess if you want something more relaxed, then 20 versus 20 might be more comfortable for you. Mounted Warfare is a great game mode. It's like a smaller version of that Game of Thrones scene. A lot more people are on foot than I originally thought, which I was thinking that was going to be a bad thing, but it isn't, as it creates this hectic environment where you have to fight both riders and foot soldiers.
Onward, horse!
The only time you get to be on a horse is when you respawn, or if a rider dies, you can take theirs. So you are incentivized to get into the fighting, which creates this crazy mini war of knights and horses just slamming into each other. If you could have control over when you're a horse, people will just wait around to get on one. The horse is easy to control, thankfully. It only feels a little stiff. The spear isn't the most feedback intensive thing to use, but it does the job. It hits that spot of not too hard, but not too easy either, creating similar feelings to the combat. Now, I wish I could give more detail, but it's so hard to find a lobby for this game mode. I originally thought it was impossible, but when trying to get footage, I managed to get into one. Every time I search, it puts me into a random 20 versus 20 game mode instead. I'm not sure if this is a server issue or a low player count one, but it's annoying. 1v1s are what you expect, although I found more people here were willing to be toxic. Maybe that's because you see it more, but that's my only real observation. 3 versus 3 works like search and destroy, just without the objective. First team to 5 round wins, and when you die you're out for the round. This game mode is probably the most snowbally out of the game modes, as it can become a 2v1 quite often, which, like we've said, it isn't impossible to win, but it is obviously going to be harder. So you're having to rely on other people allowing those 1v1s to take place. To be fair, I had people allowing them more often than not. It's a lot slower, and definitely for you if you're a bit more competitive, but the quality of this game mode can easily come down to how much other people are douchebags. I've spent most of the video praising the game, but I think it's equally important to mention some issues that people might have. I originally thought that this game came out recently, so I was less inclined to talk about the issues, but then I found out Chivalry 2 came out nearly a year and a half ago, so it baffles me that some of these issues have not been fixed. Graphics pop in frequently. I play the game on the original Xbox One, so maybe that contributes to it. However, it didn't affect my experience, but I know it can affect others as it gets pretty bad at times. The game might be unsuited for people who like to carry, and who want a massive impact in PvP modes. There definitely is a high skill ceiling. Getting good at combat will impact your wins, just not nearly as much as other games. Team Deathmatch might be better for those players, although its spawning system is similar to Overwatch's. You have a general spawning area on one side of the map, so you can easily get camped within your spawn and snowballed. If you want to be an archer, archery has a very steep learning curve which can push people into melee. Which maybe is the point. The achievement for getting 100 kills as an archer is called playing the wrong game. It's weird at that point. Why bother having archery at all if that's the attitude? I get it's a joke, but this game does not like archers. I feel it's better to be inclusive than exclusive. So customization is not a bad thing to have. Although having more attachment to this idea that you are a singular heroic knight as opposed to cannon fodder might disengage from the point. Having customization only bolsters the heroic knight idea. People obviously like that customization and that's fine. I'm just pointing it out as it seems to be against the game's ideas. The game is still buggy. The interact button is the same as the emote wheel, so interacting with things glitches and sticks the emote wheel on my face, which pushes me away from interacting with things and engaging with this game. Maybe this is an Xbox specific issue. Regardless, it just destroys the flow of my gameplay. So I feel like this is actually a bigger issue than I'm making it sound. And it's odd that it has not been patched yet. There is no fix for this. You cannot reassign buttons or choose a different controller scheme. Any game mode that isn't 32 versus 32 feels so quiet and awkward. I will go as far as to say that if you want the Chivalry 2 experience, you should only ever play 32 versus 32. It seems like those other game modes were just tacked on with less thought. I understand that other players might prefer them. I just mean it does not feel like they designed this game with those game modes in mind. The spawns on some maps are either too close or too far, which doesn't give you room to breathe, or you could just get spawn count. If it's too far away, then you idle a lot as you have to make your way back, and it's even worse for those slower classes. Despite these flaws, I feel Chivalry is a game you should at least have a swing at. Maybe not for its regular price of £34, I'd say £15 is a fair price for this game. It's chaotic and it's fun and it's stupid, and it's some of the most fun I've had with knight combat. There are limitations to the chaos this game brings. The more I play this game, the more I feel like I'm getting closer to running out of this game. Like the hecticness and combat is just going to lose its uniqueness. That I'm left with this game's combat. Which, yes, it's skillful. I just don't know if it's fun. That might just be a personal preference though, I admit. Because it's not boring. Far from it. I'm just not sure this game has enough long-term hooks for me. And the bugs don't make me want to stay. The best way to describe it is like a cool song that you discover. It's really good and you vibe well with it. But the more you listen to it, the more it just becomes noise. It loses that vibe that made it special. It loses what made it good. That's my thoughts with 14 hours of playtime. It's a game I see myself enjoying for like another month. But after that, I'm not sure. I think you should give this game a play. I would just try this game before you commit to its full price, however. As of writing this video, it is on the Xbox Game Pass, so there's an option. If you want chaotic combat, or knight combat, I can recommend this highly. Just not at such a price tag.